Okay, hello. This is it's one of my favorite topics, and it's something that I haven't really ever done a webinar about today. And it talks about the reason that a lot of people are unhappy practicing law. Now, this is actually this particular topic. I think it applies to both men and women, but a lot of times, not to be sexist or anything, but it often applies to men, probably more often than women. But it also applies to kind of alpha females and alpha males a lot more than necessarily than just people that are happy working for others. So this is one of the reasons I think that a lot of people, yourself included, may be unhappy practicing law. So this webinar today, I'm on a little bit of a time schedule. So what I'm going to do is I will do the webinar and then we'll take a quick break, and then I'll come back and answer some questions. I'm in a little bit of a time crunch here today. I'm not going to be able to answer a ton of questions, but I should be able to get to several of them before we break. And this is not one of our longer webinars. If you're used to sitting at these things for 2 or 3 hours, so you definitely won't have to do so now. And the reason I like this particular topic, just as an aside, is a lot of this kind of applies to me, and it applies to a lot of people that I saw when I was practicing law that were unhappy and ended up doing other things. And so this is actually a very common reason that people are unhappy, but it's also a very good reason to potentially stay practicing law if you don't seek a future in the way you're doing things. So I receive calls all the time and emails from people that are interested in making lateral moves. And a lot of times, probably 30 to 40% of the time, I tell people they should stay where they are. And I do this because I understand that people are trying to move a lot of times for the wrong reasons. I do not have a lot of reasons to try to convince someone to stay at a firm. And there's plenty of candidates out there that need help. And if someone is moving for the wrong reasons, it doesn't really make sense for me to help them. So a lot of times people don't understand something I talk about quite a bit, which are their roles as either soldiers or generals. And a lot of people that are soldiers that want to be generals don't really understand, what they need to do and why switching firms is not going to solve their problems. And it's a very common problem for attorneys working in law firms, and really what I'm going to be talking about today. And so at each step of your career, it's really important that you understand whether or not you're expected to be a soldier or a general, and in order to do that, to excel at it. One of the things I believe that destroys a lot of careers, both associates and even summer associates and even partners, is the kind of the internal conflict they experience between being a soldier and a general. And pretty much every attorney I speak with is one or the other. And a lot of times they're unhappy based on their ability to be one or the other. And to succeed in the practice of law and at a law firm, you really need to be an effective soldier, and then you need to transition to being a general. So I'll talk a little bit about what that means today. And then if an attorney tries to be a general before their time, then the attorney typically gets crushed and has by the law firm and the people that they're working for, and will have an unsatisfying career, and honestly will never reach their full potential in the practice of law. And a lot of times people that are soldiers, they're good soldiers, never transition to be generals. So this is a very important thing to talk about as well. And then we'll have an unsatisfying career as a soldier and not a general. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. You may not understand exactly what I'm talking about at this point, but as I talk through this, you will understand in detail what it is and what box you fit in, and the importance of being a soldier at one time and then transition to be a general. And no one starts their career out as a general unless they just can be self-taught or whatever. But the point to understand is you can never start your career. You can never not start your career as a soldier and you expect to be successful unless you become a general. You always need to transition to being a general. So this particular topic is about how you can move from being one to the other, and the importance of your role in what you do at each step of your career. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the soldier. So the soldier, you can think about it this way. For thousands of years, the battlefield has always been broken up into soldiers and generals. And soldiers are expected to work hard, to fight, to be expendable, meaning they're expendable, meaning they can die, they're expected to dedicate their hearts, bodies, and souls to the cause. And they're also expected to learn. The best soldiers are the ones that fight the hardest. They follow orders. They respect their superiors. They earn the respect of their peers. They get mentors from generals. They do a good job, and they learn how things work and do the best they can to become generals. And those who do not do these things stay soldiers, or they die fighting, or they end up doing something else completely, meaning they don't advance and they leave. And this is the exact same thing that happens in law firms. Most attorneys in law firms never become generals because they don't really ever excel as soldiers. And so they don't have the level of commitment and discipline necessary to become a general. So just think about it this way. If someone starts out as a soldier and they do a really good job and they learn and they advance, they become an officer, and then from there they can advance. And that's just how it's supposed to be. In law firms, young attorneys are expected to be soldiers, meaning they're expected to be work extremely hard. They're expected to be dedicated. They're expected not to question authority. And the experience of being a soldier is basically you follow orders, you do what you're asked, and you learn all this stuff. You watch what the generals are doing, and you simply learn in the job. You follow orders, but you carry them out, and you don't question them. And the idea of not questioning orders means you don't talk behind the general's back. You fight with everything you can for the cause, and you make the generals, and other soldiers look good. And this is the role of an associate inside of a law firm. It's the counsel in the law firm. It's the attorney with no business who gets work from generals. So law firms are divided up into soldiers that are doing all the work for others, and generals who basically are bringing them the work and have the power. And the problem for many attorneys, meaning talented young attorneys in the best law firms, is that they want to be generals before they're ready, meaning they think that they know better. They're not loyal to the firm. They're very ambitious and smart and think very highly of themselves and like they should be doing something better or different. And they went to top law schools and did well there, so they can get entitles them to be generals up right away. And most of these people, like the associates, believe how important they are, how smart they are, how special they are. And they've been told all this throughout their lives because they're achievers. And most of them have worked very hard before getting to law firms and are now ready for the rewards that come with success. And this is not meant to be. The armies of major law firms are so elite that just getting into them is the first step. Meaning, once you get into a prestigious law firm, you are now a soldier. You are not a general. And this is what so many young associates that come out of good backgrounds, they think that, or schools, they think that when they come out, they're entitled to that all this respect as a soldier and to have all these different things. And one of the most important needs of people is to feel important, meaning everyone wants to feel important and like they're in charge of their careers. We want to feel like if we work hard and apply ourselves, that we're going to develop the ability to master our lives, which is good. And attorneys are like this as well. They want to feel important, in control, and as if they're accomplishing something important and meaningful with their work. And unfortunately, this isn't just how the law firm environment works. Let me tell you about a theory of human motivation. And it's called self-determination theory. And it deals with the psychological needs of people that want to grow. And the research has consistently demonstrated that people are motivated more by intrinsic motivation, which means they're doing an activity because it satisfies them, than by extrinsic things, which are doing an activity because they're paid, for example. There's two researchers, Edward Zeke and Richard Bryan, who've expanded this research, and they found that there are really three main intrinsic needs that are important to the psychological health of the person. The first is competence. People want to feel like they're in control of outcomes, and they believe that they've mastered a certain task. And the research found that if people are given positive feedback on tasks, then they have better motivation to do well. If you tell someone they're doing well, then they're more motivated to do well and to keep doing well. And so positive feedback, of course, makes people feel like they're doing a good job. And this is important for their continuing interest in the different subject matters of the task. And then negative feedback, by the way, has the opposite effect. People will be less motivated to do what you work if you give them negative feedback. The next one is autonomy. So people want to feel autonomous. They want to feel autonomy, like they have control of their lives, and they want to feel when they're in control, they feel like they can work harder. And extrinsic controls, when you have deadlines, sometimes reporting, and those sorts of things will demotivate you because they restrict control. It's very interesting, this whole concept of autonomy, because I have a lot of people that work for me that actually resist, that do a very good job, that resist having any type of control, like reporting and things like that. And it's very important. And of course, the other one is psychological relatedness, which people want to react with others. They want to feel connected. And the more people feel connected and people care about them, the more healthy they're likely to be. Think about these three needs. And basically, as a soldier, most law firms don't fulfill those needs. People don't feel competent. It takes a great deal of time to be an effective attorney. When you start as an attorney, your work is ripped up. You're told you're not doing a good job. It can take a long time to be a good attorney. For example, like to have any type of good understanding of the practice area, most attorneys, like you don't really learn how to be a litigator or a corporate attorney, know what it takes until you've been doing the work at least 5 years. And when you're working in a law firm, you often just receive very little positive feedback, meaning you're not told how to get better at your job. You're receiving negative feedback. The partners are telling you you're doing something wrong. Senior associates are marking up your work and telling you you're not doing a good job. And the problem is like when attorneys receive all this negative feedback, they're going to care less about their work, which is what happens in a lot of law firms. And the next one is attorneys don't feel autonomous. They don't feel like they're in control over the work. So they're a large law firm. The soldier attorney often will be working on small subset of matters with all sorts of deadlines. They're not in charge of matters, meaning they're not actually running the matters. And that makes them feel not autonomous, like they don't lack control. They're just being given things to do. And the law firm soldier attorneys often don't experience what's called psychological relatedness. The partners are distant, not necessarily relating to them, and they don't feel obviously related to people they're working with because they're competitive with them, and other people are competitive. And so soldiers may try to undermine you and create problems. And the work can often be very isolating because the attorney can often spend days in the office working long hours with hardly any human contact. And it's not healthy from a psychological standpoint. Working as a soldier, and it's not easy, and you have to dedicate yourself. And working as a soldier in a law firm is often more difficult than being a soldier in other legal environments because it's simply not healthy from a psychological standpoint. Attorneys that are working in law firms, it's very common, will be depressed. They'll have health problems. Many times they'll have substance abuse problems. It's very common. They'll have relationship or marital problems and all sorts of things that frankly should be expected because the law firm is often unhealthy. And everything about it from a work environment standpoint is the opposite of what should be healthy. And therefore, it's no wonder that young and unhappy soldiers working in these conditions really want to become soldiers. They don't have any control. Everyone's telling them what to do. You're not connected with others. And so these pressures can really many times, because you don't feel like it's how hard it's going to be to get ahead and so many things, they can drive talented young attorneys crazy. And I'm talking to attorneys all the time. And typically the attorneys I speak with say things like this, or I'm sorry, I'll just tell you kind of the example. So the first one is like a very motivated young attorney that thinks they understand the system and don't think that their superiors know how things are done. Very common. Or they think they should be making more money and they want to do something. They want to go to another firm that's going to offer them more opportunity. That's very common. Or partners who will listen, or a higher salary. And these attorneys don't pretend really to understand the system, or respect their superiors, and they're not overly concerned with compensation many times because they're simply trying to improve their career. And they may be looking because there's not enough work, or because the attorney, they're not getting enough experience in the practice area, or just because they want to move to a better firm, and that's common as well. But the attorneys work very hard for a few years in a major law firm and may conclude that the system doesn't work for them, meaning being a soldier and having to advance. And so often they decide they want to go in-house or to a boutique law firm with fewer demands. And so it's important to think about the person's a soldier, they feel isolated, they feel like there's no future, they want to go somewhere else where they can feel valued or where they don't have to worry about these things. And a lot of times what these attorneys are doing is they're unhappy. So they're making career choices, where they're going to feel important. Like you go in-house and you can be the law firm's legal expert, or you can work in a smaller firm and be respected for having worked in a big firm. You want to feel important. Or sometimes they'll do something on their own. And a lot of times what happens is when these soldiers go into, people that should be soldiers go into these other environments, a lot of them fail. They're motivated by self-determination need. If they were to stay in the practice law as soldiers and become generals, they actually might succeed. So a lot of times, all these things that are affecting the soldier, a soldier is very hard, by the way. If you're a soldier, like you're working with other soldiers, you're told to do all these things, you don't know why you're getting these orders, but you're not often praised by people above you. And a lot of times people don't realize it. They're so psychologically stressed about their current, about the law firm environment, the need for self-determination, that they don't realize what's going to happen. Sometimes attorneys want to feel confident. So what they'll do is they will take these jobs that are beneath them, or they'll take jobs where they may be surrounded by others who they believe make them feel important. For example, the Harvard Law graduate working a public interest job after you're in a law firm, this sort of thing. Harvard Law or Stanford or one of these great schools goes to a law firm. They're very unhappy being a soldier inside of a law firm. They realize that's what it's about. So then they go in-house with a small company, or maybe the Yale graduate, after working in one of these environments where they're not treated like a special person and everything, decides to go teach law school. A lot of times attorneys will drop out of large law firms and become solo practitioners. That's another one. Or they'll start a small business. And the idea is they want to feel competent. So if just think about this. If you're like a Stanford or Yale law graduate and you're working in a big law firm and you're a first or second year attorney, you're basically, no one's making you feel important. No one's like making you feel like you're in control. You're just basically taking orders from partners and part of a small part of the machine. And people don't like that. And that's why a lot of times people from the best law schools just not doing it. They will do it for a year, but maybe that's it. A lot of people want to feel autonomous, meaning just according to the psychological principles, they want to feel in control. And often they'll take positions where they're in a position where no one's telling them what to do. Think about that. So think about when I view resumes of people that a lot of times that have gone to these top law schools and had these great experiences, like maybe they clerked on the Supreme Court, maybe they had these incredible law school pedigrees or things. Look at what they do. Look at like someone like Barack Obama or Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton graduated from Yale Law School. What does he do? He goes and teaches at the University of Arkansas Law School, where he's like the big guy. What does Obama do? He does something very similar. He works at a summer and realizes he's not going to be special there, so he goes and gets a job teaching at the University of Chicago Law School. You just have to see what these people are doing. People that are very talented, a lot of times they won't work in law firms. They want to do something where they feel autonomous. And so they'll often start their own law firms. That's another common thing. I was reading about a very successful Harvard Law School graduate the other day, one of the most successful, it was incredible, graduated from Harvard Law School at the age of 19. But he went and started his own firm. People will often start their own firms. Sometimes they'll find jobs that allow them to work in unsupervised fashion. Sometimes it's in government. They'll do fellowships. They'll do public interest. Sometimes they'll just start businesses, meaning I'm going to be in this law firm. And they'll do other things that will allow them to have more freedom. And sometimes they'll write a book. Other times they'll become a legal recruiter. That's another big one. That's what I did. My job is out of control. I'm just taking orders. It's very unpleasant. What am I supposed to do? Like the only thing I can think of is, so this is how people think. They may become sports agents, mortgage brokers, contract attorneys. That's another big one. So people become contract attorneys when they have these great backgrounds because all of a sudden they're not accountable to anyone. Their time is autonomous. They may become real estate investors, real estate agents, who knows, anything or something else. And they make the choices they do because they want to feel autonomous. They want to feel like they're autonomous and they want to feel like they're in control. Think about this. Connected. A lot of times, the attorney that wants connection will seek out environments where they feel respected. So they may join law firms composed of people like themselves, meaning a bunch of people that work in big law firms and went to good schools, and now they're at this little boutique firm, but they all talk about their clerkships and law degrees. Or sometimes they go back to school. That's very common. They'll go back to school and they go to business school or get a, master's degree. Sometimes they'll go into the government or public interest. I've seen people start yoga studios and Pilates studios. I've seen that very recently. And this connection will often go to great lengths. They want what they're missing in the law firm is that connection. And so they'll find work where they can experience connection with others. And a lot of times what they're doing, just so you understand, is they're trying to be generals and they're trying to be in control instead of learning the ropes in the law firm and going forward and playing that game to do other things. And then a lot of times when they go in-house, which is a need for control and autonomy and all those things, they'll realize that they're expected to be soldiers there as well. And sometimes they'll take jobs in smaller firms and realize they're expected to be soldiers there too. So it's very common. People go to boutique firms and the boutique's like, oh, you're going to have all this freedom. It's a lifestyle thing. So when they get there, it's more of the same. They're expected to be soldiers there too. Often they'll take jobs that don't necessarily use their legal skills. And they realize and after doing that, they can't go back to a law firm. Meaning once you leave a law firm, you're in a position where it's very difficult to go back. Sometimes they'll take jobs outside of the law or jobs that are only marginally making use of their legal skills and never make use of their potential as an attorney. Other times they'll want to be self-determining. They'll run and gravitate towards jobs where they feel important so they can feel like generals. They just can't take the pressure of being a soldier inside of a law firm. So I'm sorry for talking so much about this, but it's very important because people are leaving law firms before they should. What they're doing is they're not learning to be soldiers before they're generals. And the idea of becoming a general is you become a general when you're the best soldier, meaning you have to learn how to follow others. You have to learn all this stuff to be the best possible soldier you can be. So no one, though, is going to make anyone a general that hasn't become a best soldier and isn't showing they're willing to sacrifice as a soldier. And it's not easy to be a good soldier inside of a law firm. It's very difficult to be competent like that. You have to think about this. Very few attorneys become excellent soldiers. It's just not common. Most of them, the ones that become excellent soldiers, are the same ones that are taken under the wings of the generals in advance. Think about it. If you're working for a partner or partners in a law firm, and you're working as hard as you possibly can, and you're doing what they say, and you're dedicated, that's going to put you in a position where they're going to advance you. Of course, this is what generals do. If someone's really dedicated to them, they will commit to that person. It's always been this way. You need to work and you need to walk before you can run. And the reason I tell so many qualified attorneys very highly that, right where they are as soldiers is that there's no point of lateraling if they're lateraling because they want to be soldiers. They say, oh, I want more freedom or I want all this stuff. But really what they're saying is I don't like being a soldier. And sometimes they feel that lateraling will change all these psychological issues they're facing. And not feeling competent, related, and autonomous, all these feelings go away with time. As the attorney learns the job, they get more responsibility, and they become better. All these things will go away eventually when they become a partner. The whole point of all of this is learning and showing your dedication in order to advance and become a general. You really have to be a soldier before you can become a general. So the next one is the general. All large, and this is what everyone wants to be, but all large law firms have this upper out system where most attorneys are expected to leave when they get more senior or they're asked to leave. It's just and so that's how it works. Some attorneys are asked to leave at their 8th or 10th year. Others are made partner and then given a few years to become self-sufficient. They make them non-equity or whatever, and they give them a few years to get business. But regardless of what happens, attorneys that are inside of law firms are expected to become generals. And if they don't become generals, then they're not going to have job security. You have to ask, what is a general inside of a law firm? A general is someone who has his or her own clients and generates work. It's as simple as that. And the general gives orders, meaning they tell associates and stuff what they should be doing. They're in control, and the general has control over destiny. It's great being a general. Generals can, if you have your own business, you can do pretty much anything you want. You can move firms, but you have control. And generals like being generals. Being a general is everything that being a soldier is not. You have competence. So unlike in being an associate, you typically feel competent because your work in the way an associate isn't subject to constant criticism. You're doing work for companies that are paying you for their expertise, and your opinions and work are respected by the soldiers. The soldiers are supposed to generally will look up to you, and you're held in high regard by soldiers. They respect you. They talk to you as a soldier, and they're held in high regard. They have autonomy, meaning partner generals of business typically feel pretty much in control of their lives and careers. Their compensation and their success within the firm, meaning how much money they make, and is often a product, and most often a product of how much business they bring in. And they also can set the terms of how their work should be done, meaning they can give orders about everything. And then the psychological relatedness, there's not the same competition to get ahead. They're treated well by associates and others whom they provide work. They're respected. They speak with clients and they connect with the clients need them. And there's less psychological isolation as a general than there would be as a soldier. And again, this is what you need to understand. And people miss this. The entire point of spending all this time as a soldier is to become a general. And if the attorney succeeds and is happy to the extent they can be effective as a general. And attorneys with the most business, for example, and power in the legal profession, they love their jobs. They really like what they're doing. Think about that. They do. They like their jobs. And a lot of times they will continue practicing these partners their entire careers because it's rewarding and psychologically healthy for them. And so when you think about being a soldier, it's not supposed to be fun. And not every soldier is expected to be around long enough to become a general. And the general often has more authority, is respected more, lives better, and is seen as happier than the soldier. Just think about the general in a large law firm. They make good living, they're respected, they have a typically nice property or homes, and they have a better position. And soldiers need to often buckle down before they become general. Not every soldier can become a general. Think about it. It's like that, and if you have a bunch of enlisted people, like very few of those people are going to become generals, just as in law firms. If you have a ton of associates in a large law firm, very few of them are going to become generals. So I speak with attorneys on an ongoing basis, and there's different classes of them and types, but I speak with attorneys that have a decade or more of experience at large law firms, and they're often gently nudged out because they don't have business and the law firm doesn't have work for them. It's very common. Tons of attorneys in the lateral market fit this bill. It's just a very common thing. And the attorneys that want to go in-house or find these attorneys that don't have any business that are senior, they need to either go in-house or find a law firm that has a lot of work that can pay senior people without business. And think about it. When you're in that position, you're still a soldier. And at that point, when you get senior, people expect you to be a general. An old soldier, obviously, is not necessarily a good thing. They should have advanced to become something. A lot of time, there's associates, another one, that have a decade or more of experience at the large law firms, and they're very slowly developing a book of business. They're becoming competent in marketing, meaning speaking, going to industry events, writing, and so forth. And they're often considered making a move because they feel that there'd be more opportunities for them if they take their books of business elsewhere. And so these are attorneys that are slowly becoming generals, which is good. You want to become a general. A general has business. A general has control. And then, of course, there's attorneys who are generals that have large books of business, and they're looking for firms that will provide them with better platforms, better support, and more take-home pay. But the problem for all attorneys in the law firm environment happens when they have 10 or more years of experience and they're still soldiers and not yet generals. So an attorney who's getting more senior and is asked to leave is being pushed out generally because they don't show the potential to be a general. That's just how it works. And the partner with no business or the counsel with no business that are looking for jobs, they're not generals. They're still soldiers. And then there's attorneys who are at the general level. They may be partners, but they have a difficult time. Unless staying employed, unless you become generals. You as a soldier, as you age, people do not like old soldiers, and they want young soldiers, and just how it works in a law firm. A lot of times when a more senior attorney is still a soldier, that attorney will experience lots of stress because they're still a soldier. They don't have autonomy, competence, or psychological relatedness, and they've been in that position for a long time. And if the law firm environment doesn't provide them those opportunities for autonomy, competence, and psychological relatedness, because they're still soldiers, then they're going to be unhappy. So think about how unhappy you would be in the law firm if you're always like a soldier. You never are advancing. It's not good. And a lot of attorneys without business at major law firms are always unhappy. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And so you need to understand that the whole point of being a soldier is to become a general. And if you don't become a general, then you're always maybe probably going to be unhappy. So you need to, at some point, transition to be in general. So here's a question: should go in-house or take a position outside of a law firm? That's the question. In my position, I only make law firm placements. And the idea is, when it's clear to me that an attorney will never be a general, then I do recommend that they go in-house. If someone's not going to become a general, they can find in-house jobs on LawCross and other sites. And again, if you're not going to succeed as a general, and you don't have the potential to be a general, then the law firm life is not something, most cases, it's going to work for you. You should find a position inside of a company, or maybe do something outside of the practice of law. You don't want to be a soldier forever. I don't think. Some people are happy doing it, and that's fine. A lot of people do become senior and with no business and work in law firms and are happy being soldiers. But from what I've seen, it's not a pleasant existence for a lot of them. And I think a lot of them are unhappy. But you may have the psychological fortitude to be actually a good soldier and happy being a soldier. And you may get more senior in the law firm you're in, may have the work to keep you busy. And if that's the case, there's really nothing wrong with staying a soldier as long as you can, as long as you understand you can't remain a soldier forever, and that your job as a soldier will generally end at some point. So let's talk about generals on smaller battlefields, which is interesting. So a lot of attorneys make the mistake of believing that because they can't be a general in one firm, meaning like a huge firm where it's very difficult to become a general, that means they can't be a general in any firm, and therefore they need to go in-house and do something completely different, which is very risky. So I want to make sure that you understand that this is not always the case. It's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, like at some firms like Cravath or things, to become a general. It's just very hard. And in being a general for a smaller firm, for a smaller army, is often much easier. Attorneys in major law firms may often drop out of the practice of law very early because they believe they're never going to succeed based on how difficult it is to become a general wherever they're working. Because of the fact that, think about it, how hard it is to become a general for large law firms. The billing rates are very high. There's often potential clients. It may be often difficult to be a general in the largest firms. It's very difficult, but it's not the case. If you're not general in the largest, most competitive markets, you can also go into a smaller market or smaller firm. And you should think about, how can I become a general? Because being a general is actually very fun. It's a great position and something that a lot of people, want to do. And it changes what it's like to be from being a soldier. And it's much, much better. And really, this is the entire point of the law firm model. You come in, you're a soldier, and then you become a general. Generals have their own clients. Because they have their own clients, they control their income. And they have people below them that are soldiers. So you're a general, you have soldiers working for you. It's much better. You mentor others. You have power and influence. And you can move your practice. This is what partners do all the time. They can move their practice to another firm if they're unhappy. They can let soldiers go. They say, we can't afford you anymore, to save money if they get slow. And they're respected by their peers and subordinates. Being a general is much different than being a soldier, but it takes time and a lot of sacrifice to become a general. Like, you can't just join a law firm and expect to become a general. So this is, I think, a very important point to understand, that in order to succeed as a general, become a general, you need to spend time as a soldier. And if you don't become a general at your current firm, you can go to another firm and be a general. And that's the whole point of practicing law. When you think about it, there's in a law firm, there's a lot of brilliance behind the law firm model, because the attorneys with the most ambition, motivation, smarts are put in law firms and told to do everything they can to succeed. And to do this, they do it when they're young, when they have a lot of energy, but a lot of them do not understand the system. So the way the system works is it's going to make them work like crazy for several years. It's never going to tell them that they can only succeed if they become generals. But a lot of firms in this war get psychologically fed up. Attorneys, they get confused and they don't really understand what's going on. And instead of understanding that they commit and that they learn and they get clients, they can become generalists. But most attorneys quit before that. And this is what law firms want. Law firms want to bring in new soldiers when certain soldiers get tired or aren't doing their job anymore, or just get fed up. And they only want generals at the end, because generals are what make the entire program run. So that you work, and the idea is you eventually if you do what they want, you become a general. And early in their careers, a lot of attorneys conclude that they have no interest in working in a law firm anymore. And they decide that this conclusion is because they decide they want to go in-house or work for the government or do a different career, and very early in their careers. And partners in a lot of law firms reach the same conclusion, and they often go in-house or do something earlier in their careers if they don't have business. And so the need for getting out of law firms and other positions is usually not where it all ends. Most attorneys I speak with who leave law firms and go in-house have very short tenures there. Some last a year, but very few last more than a few years. There's a lot of economic forces at work that are going to take these attorneys away from in-house jobs. So the majority of them are unsatisfied. They're leaving because they still don't feel in reward and control of their careers. They still feel a lot of control. They're in-house and people aren't listening to them. They're not praised. They have very little control over their compensation. And they realize sometimes that whatever they do, it doesn't matter a lot. Regardless of what you do, whether you do in a law firm or in-house, the point is you definitely want to eventually become a general. And you need to do this if you're ever going to be fulfilled practicing law. You need to work as a soldier. You need to learn. You need to dedicate yourself to the firm. And then you want to become generals. And really, the most angst and dissatisfaction with law comes because people are soldiers and not generals. And the only solution is really to become the best soldier you can be. And along the way, learn how to become a general. So I'm going to take a quick break just for a minute or two. And then when I come back, I will answer any questions anyone has. I do have a little bit of a hard stop today because I'm actually getting on a plane. So I won't take a ton of questions, but I'll take as many as I can. And then next week, if I don't get to your questions this week, then I will make sure that I answer them beginning of the webinar next week. So thank you, and I'll just be back in a minute or two. Thanks. Okay, just give me 1 second here. I'm going to pull up a document and then to answer these questions. And yeah, I wish I wasn't pressed on time today. It's usually on these webinars, I have all the time in the world to answer questions. I don't know what's going on here, but I will answer as many as I can today. And then again, next week, hopefully I'll be a lot more available for questions. So give me 1 second. I'm just pulling in my Zoom. This webinar today, the topic is, it seems interesting. There's a lot of things I've talked about. The idea is that what's interesting about law firms is the longer you're in them, the more you understand the kind of the role and what you're supposed to be doing. So the question, how do you personally distinguish temporary career dissatisfaction you see result in personal happiness? Yeah, so I think a lot of times that's a good point. If you're just completely miserable and you don't see anything from this commitment and so forth leading anywhere, then I think that it doesn't make sense to continue what you're doing. Sometimes I think that when you look at a lot of very successful attorneys, they don't go into a law firm and stay there. They're motivated too much. They feel like almost like it's, I don't know how to put it, that slavery or something along those lines. And they feel that they don't want to participate in that. They feel like they just don't want to be full-time attorneys. If you're really unhappy and you don't think anything's going to change, then obviously working in a law firm is not for you. And that's the case for a lot of people. If you're not happy, then you should leave. If you don't ever see things changing. And sometimes I did want to answer one other quick point, but if you're unhappy and it may be related to personal things that are happening in your life, but my opinion is really, and I hate to say this, that any job you do should make you feel good. You should be excited about the work. There may be temporary issues with it. Sometimes, I guess my grandfather used to say, 80% of the work is routine and you live for the other 20% that really makes you happy. I don't know. That's one idea. But the point is that you should enjoy what you do. You should be excited about getting up in the morning and doing the work. You should enjoy your position, and you should see, and if you don't enjoy it and that makes you really unhappy, then it's probably not something that will help you in the long run or something you should be doing in the long run. And I guess that's the best way to answer that question. You can't do, if you're not excited about something, If you don't see a future, if it doesn't excite you, and you believe that the cause of your unhappiness is, and you don't think that even becoming a partner would make you happy, then of course you should not do that. Yeah. What strategies can lawyers employ to maintain their motivation, enthusiasm, don't take? What you have to do is in order to succeed, you have to start. This is a good point. So the question is, what strategies or techniques can lawyers employ to maintain their motivation, enthusiasm for the legal work while they're still in the phase of taking orders and not yet in a position to give them? So the idea is that if you're in a law firm and you're not feeling motivated, enthusiastic, opposed to taking orders, you need to start thinking positively of the people that you work with. What am I saying? So you need to be excited about, you need to think positively of the people that you're doing legal work for. You need to think positively of the whole, everybody you're working with and the work. You need to get excited about them. That's the way to do it. You have to just tolerate it and see that there's going to be something down the line. And that's really, in my opinion, probably the most effective way to work through all that. Okay, in your experience, do you think there's a particular point of a lawyer's career to start transitioning from a soldier to a general, or is it a gradual process? How can lawyers recognize when it's the right time to make this shift? You transition in a law firm based on your competence as a soldier. So that's the way it works. So the more time you dedicate to it, and the better you become, the more likely it is that you will become a general. So what happens in kind of the point of this webinar, what I was saying, is that a lot of people try to transition into being a general and by leaving the firm or going to do something else way before it's time. And so, the longer you stick with a law firm and the more you feel like you can transition, the better off you're going to be. I only have time for a couple more questions. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get these. So your webinar highlights the idea that not everyone is cut out to be a general in the legal profession. Can you discuss the potential downsides or drawbacks of aspiring to be a leader in the legal field and how individuals can make informed decisions about pursuing this path? Okay, so the idea of becoming a leader is just that the longer you do something, the more committed you are to something, the more likely it is that they're going to advance and become good at it. So every person in every profession, in order to succeed, has to go through a stage where they're working for others and they're apprenticing. In terms of aspiring to be a leader, all you're doing is trying to become an expert in whatever it is you do, and then getting advanced by other people that are experts. And so making an informed decision about that means, can you commit to the law firm? Can you commit to the work you're doing? And can you see yourself advancing? And that's really yeah, I think this is the last question I have time for today, but I'm sorry for you to get long. You should have much longer webinars. As someone who has experienced both sides of the legal profession, what advice would you give to law students and young attorneys trying to make an informed decision about their career path, taking into account the pros of working in a law firm versus starting their own firm? The problem with starting your own firm, so this is actually a good question. So if you start your own firm, and especially as an early attorney, you're never going to have big clients. How are you supposed to attract large clients and big work? So you're just not going to do that. The people that are going to do that are going to be, people from big firms. People from the big firms attract the best clients. So the more sophisticated work you'll be exposed to in a large firm. So starting your own firm can be a good decision. There's things you can do where, personal injury is often very smart. And there's a lot of different things that people can do if they want to start their own firm. But I don't think that starting your own firm is a good idea unless you want to continue doing work that's not necessarily that important for smaller clients. You're just never going to have access to large clients if you're just trying to have your own firm. So that's the idea. So there's a couple of different points, and I'll make this, and then I gotta go. But you have firms that are different sizes and have different types of work. So this is the largest firms that the clients spend the most money. And then you have these kind of mid-sized firms and so forth. And these firms are spending, the clients are also spending a lot of money. And then you get into kind of these mid-sized firms where the clients don't spend as much. And then you get into smaller firms, which tend to be consumer firms, meaning they're representing people. And then you get to these firms. So this is what happens when you work in a large law firm. The clients are willing to continue writing checks for different matters and continue paying high hourly rates for your work. But if you start your own firm, like you're going to be doing this kind of work. Like for small companies that don't have a lot of money, or for individuals who don't have a lot of money, maybe you can get a little bigger clients. And then as you get into even the smaller firms, these people are just individuals that don't have big budgets, and they'll say, I can only pay $500 for this will or whatever. Whereas if you're working in a firm like this, it might be a company, and they're willing to pay, money for you to bill on different matters. So this is kind of how the whole thing works. Like you just need to realize that if you stay in a large firm or even a mid-sized firm, you're going to have access to bigger clients, more work, and the opportunity to make more money and also work on more sophisticated work. So that's how the whole process works, and really the main thing that I guess I have to share about that. Thank you for being on this webinar. I apologize that it's a little bit short today and I have to go. But what I would say is I think maybe next week we'll do a resume review. I'm not 100% sure, but if I can, we will send out a notification about that. And that is always, we try to do those at the beginning of each quarter. And that's always a very popular webinar. So you'll send your resume and then we'll go over that. And I will talk about, if you're on this webinar, I'll be sending out some information about that you'll get a notification next webinar. Thank you for being on this today. Again, I apologize, cut a little short, but next week should be fun when your resume is helpful. Thanks.